Greetings. I'd like to mansplain some things. You don't have to listen. This is just what I think is the most effective thing to do at the moment. And it reminds me of the anti-Iraq war movement. So when that was happening, you had some people who wanted to specifically champion the Iraqi insurgency. It wasn't a large section of the anti-war movement, usually the most radical people who thought that the Iraqis had a right to resist this illegal war. Now, whether or not you agreed with that, the issue was you're in the first world, and the Iraqi insurgency doesn't give a shit about what people in the first world are saying. From their perspective, they are fighting for their lives, and they're not going to fight harder or fight less harder depending on what someone 20,000 miles away says. They don't give a shit about your posturing. However, what that posturing does is alienate ordinary people in the West from the anti-war movement, which is the one thing that could actually help the insurgency by removing foreign troops. So the message was, don't say what you want to say. Don't say even what is right just because it's right. Say what will be effective in creating the conditions that you're looking to create. So, self-ID fundamentalism is incredibly misogynistic. There are no consequences that their actions could have for women that would be severe enough for them to reconsider their actions, because they don't see women as people. Lots of them are so demented, they think that women are a colonial construct. Many people have suggested that the gay rights movement wouldn't have gotten anywhere unless it had men in it. And in that sense, it was essentially a movement for the right of men to expand their sexual options. This becomes especially clear when you know that NAMBLA was part of the movement up until the early 90s. So, as much as it would be righteous and correct to say that the movement is misogynistic, to those in the cult, you're basically saying you're hurting witches, in that most of them don't believe in witches, and those that do often believe that witches should be hurt. This is where autistic and potentially gay young people come in. Men can be autistic. Men can be gay. The cult believes in both autistic people and gay people. So arguments that are made based on the humanity of these groups register in the cult logic. And the key to destroying the cult is making it undeniable that trans is not an innate category. Once trans is not an innate category, all the analogies to the civil rights movement fall apart. And it's actually quite easy to prove that trans is not an innate category. Abigail Schreier's book, Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters, did a good job of demonstrating this point. Specifically, that trans identities cluster in particular social groups and among young women in a way that truly innate categories like left-handedness do not. However, Abigail Schreier's book had two weaknesses. Firstly, it depended on caring about girls. Secondly, it was subject to comparison to the conservative idea that someone can be turned gay, and as such, the obvious and undeniable point that it was making could be dismissed. However, the statistics in Time to Think, the inside story of the collapse of the Tavistock's gender service for children, do not require the reader to care about girls and are not subject to the comparison to turning someone gay. So, trans is not an innate characteristic. It is a trauma response for some and a fetish/tool for predation for others.
Always gonna be misgendered. But it sure does pay off when I'm in the women's locker room taking my shower and open up the shower door and it's just tits and ass just hanging around, nothing on. Like, yes! Your turn.
Well, like I said, I'm not scared to go into the women's locker room. I've been in them twice now. Oh, actually 3 times.
But you can't be drooling and just staring. Nobody does any staring. It's like...
If trans was an innate characteristic, the following statistics would be impossible. Records from the Tavistock Gender Clinic show that referrals were 15 times more likely to have an autism spectrum disorder, 37 times more likely to have been in state care, 10 times more likely to have had a parent that's a registered sex offender, 42% of the referrals had lost a parent to death or divorce, and 70% had more than 5 associated features / comorbidities, including abuse, depression, self-harm, ADHD, suicide attempts, eating disorders, and bullying. The good thing about this is that the statistic concerning autistic people was also stated in a Gaurdian review of the book, entitled Time to Think by Hannah Barnes' review, What Went Wrong at GIDS. The review was written by Rachel Cook on the 19th of February 2023. In it, she writes, quote, "The statistics are horrifying. Less than 2% of children in the UK have an autism spectrum disorder. At GIDS, more than a third of referrals presented with autistic traits. Clinicians also saw high numbers of children who had been sexually abused." I have put these statistics together in a single image that can be posted on Twitter. I have also accompanied it with a quote from a GIDS clinician who, in a BBC Newsnight report entitled NHS Child Gender Clinic Staff Welfare Concerns Shut Down, told the BBC, "We have a lot of families and parents that would actively tell us that, oh, I'm so glad that at least my child is not gay or lesbian," implying that having a trans outcome would be better for their children. I have posted this graphic to dozens of self-ID fundamentalists, and not a single one has been able to address the argument. Most of them don't even try. One tried to wiggle out of it by saying it was just some dumb meme, but then it's simply a matter of posting links to the original BBC story and Guardian review. Given how highly those sources are held in the self-ID cult, it leaves them with nowhere to go. In addition to using this on dozens of random self-ID fundamentalists, it was a proven strategy for neutralizing one of Tom Tanuki's most hardworking reply guys. You all might remember Whit Gofflam, aka @MinionCabal, had been following me around for days since I had engaged with Tom Tanuki. And one of the posts he followed me onto was this post by Markel Lawyers, which reads, "If Nazis are marching in support of what you're saying, then what you're saying is bad and you should stop saying it. It's not complicated." To which I said, "Listen up, Palestinians! Right? Right, guys?" Whit Gofflam replied, "You have one point and it's wrong." I said, "Because just saying it's wrong is not an argument. If it was wrong, then you should be able to explain why it's wrong, but you can't. So your rule apparently doesn't apply to Israel, and it doesn't seem to apply to Ukraine either." I then posted pictures from the Azov battalion and the Ukrainian military holding swastikas. To which Minion Cabal said, "We're not talking about them. We're talking about you and your mates in Melbourne who had no issue sharing space with Nazis until after when you got caught." To which I replied, "No, you were talking about my point being wrong. Anyway, the Nazis brought their own megaphone and used it during the Let Women Speak speakers. The 3 groups in that space were WACA, Whistleblowers, Activists and Communities Alliance, Let Women Speak, and the Nazis. By your logic, WACA also had no issue, quote-unquote, sharing with Nazis. I promoted Tanuki's anti-fascism 3 days prior." I then took the clip that I included in my previous video promoting Tom Tanuki's anti-Nazi work. To which Minion Cabal said, "By your logic, you should have no issue with LGBTQ folk, but you do because you're a hateful moron." To which I said, "Wow, every single point you've tried to make, you have abandoned and resorted to petulance and name-calling. Anyway, why do you think it's not hateful or moronic to sterilize potentially homosexual children?" I then included a video which contains the quote from the former GIDS clinician and a clip from the BBC.
Homophobia in families is mentioned in all of the transcripts Newsnight has seen. Staff say that while there was some discussion in the service about this, they didn't feel the issue was properly addressed. We've spoken to a number of staff off the record. Most didn't want to go on camera, even on the condition of anonymity. But the transcripts are backed up by this former clinician who left GIDS last year. Their words are being voiced by an actor.
We did have a lot of families and parents who would actively tell us that, oh, I'm so glad at least my child is not gay or lesbian, implying that having a trans outcome would be better for their children.
I had a case. There was a lot of trauma in the family. The young person had come out initially as a lesbian and had faced a lot of homophobic bullying, both very subtly within the family and quite openly in school.
Minion Cabal replies, all you do is miss points by arguing semantics, pulling apart metaphors. Yeah, I can do that because I think logically. You can't do that because you don't think logically. But anyway, all in defense of hate groups and actual fucking Nazis. To which I replied, if I was doing that, you wouldn't be abandoning the points. But you're jumping around from topic to topic because you have no argument and you can't answer the question, do you think it's not hate or moronic to sterilize potentially homosexual children? Included with the GIDS clinician quote is a little caption which reads, TRAs are the ones sterilizing potentially gay children, just as they force SRS on homosexuals in Iran. Minion Cabal replies, do you think that people that do this represent the entire LGBTQ community? To which I reply, just to clarify, you are acknowledging that gender clinics are allowing homophobic parents to sterilize children whose homosexuality they wish to erase, and you agree that this is hateful and moronic, but your counterpoint is that not everyone does this? Minion Cabal replies, you realize this is Australia and not Iran, right? I reply, so now you're acknowledging what I'm saying, but your counterpoint is this isn't Iran? GIDS is in the UK. The point is, homophobes all over the world use so-called sex reassignment surgery as a way to erase homosexuality. Minion Cabal replies, that's not the fault of other trans people, implying the homosexual kids having their homosexuality erased are trans. But anyway, that's not the fault of other trans people who are just trying to, exist. I replied, nobody said it was. But it is homophobic violence being carried out by an industry that stands to make billions, destroying the bodies of gay people. Trying to address this is clearly not homophobic. Ignoring that it is now routine is detrimental to the gay community. Minion Cabal responds, so because of these few incidents, you are willing to stand shoulder to shoulder with people saying trans people should be eradicated. I responded, the GIDS quote says, a lot of families and parents. That's one clinic. There are over 400 in North America. How many sterilized gay kids is acceptable to you? As I said, the Nazis brought their own megaphone and used it during the Let Women Speak speakers, and I promoted Tanuki's Antifa prior to the event. We were not cooperating with the Nazis and we did not want them. And I reposted the clip where I promoted Tom Tanuki's anti-fascism. That's when Minion Cabal stopped following me. Not following me at all, but following me around trying to get my attention. And that's partially when I realized this is the way to break through their cult think. As much as the issue obviously is one of misogyny, the most effective way to neutralize the cult and thus create a better environment for women is to focus on the damage being done to autistic and gay young people because some of them are male and thus human in the eyes of the cult. This was then also repeated with Sean Bedlam, which, for those people who don't know, Sean Bedlam is kind of a comedian around Melbourne he's essentially another Tom Tanuki. I didn't just pick him randomly. He's a prominent figure in the Melbourne far left, and he's autistic, and he had nothing to say when presented with this information. So this is why I think it's incredibly effective, and I highly encourage people to use this strategy.
Take them to church for all the little ones that live in the dark and can't find them a bit of sun. I bang the beats in church, I get it, did it done. All my beats godly and bang like it's a hit and run. As Lord intended, I got a reason and fight against heathens until the war is ended. For all the demons that you're befriended, you got the beef, then I got a sword to end it. I know the Lord will mend it, know the Lord a healer. Yeah, I'm feeling splendid, know my God's the dealer. Yeah, he put the breeze where the leaves in the trees are. Yeah, he spread the seeds for the apes just to feed ya. He made it for us, he made us an earth. He made it for trust, a faith over the worst. A place where the young ones could play with the neighbors and birds. So bring the love, brother, and take him to church. I take him to church, I'm like a sermon with words, servant for work,